Two men in tactical vests stormed our quiet garage sale, threatening to fine a kid for selling lemonade. My aunt froze. Tyler didn't. He pulled out his phone and went live. What happened next will shock even those who thought they'd seen everything. But first, let's go back to the beginning. It was the kind of Texas afternoon where time feels syrup-thick and sun-drunk. Heat shimmered on the asphalt like a mirage, warping the edges of the cul-de-sac into something almost too perfect to disturb. Folding tables lined the driveways, each one overflowing with weathered board games, gently used crock-pots, framed cat paintings, and decades of family detritus, the kind of junk that only gains value once someone else wants it. Neighbors strolled from house to house, swapping quarters for toasters, laughter for stories. A little boy ran barefoot with a Nerf gun. Somewhere, a radio played George Strait. It was the American backyard dream in motion, humble, communal, free. And then the dream hiccuped. The SUV didn't rumble in. It prowled. Matte black, oversized, and freshly waxed, it didn't belong. The orange lights on top weren't police issue, but they were just close enough to fool someone who'd never been arrested. The air changed when it pulled up. Conversations clipped mid-sentence, flip-flop shuffles slowed. A mom instinctively stepped in front of her toddler. Then the doors opened, and out came authority, or at least its costume. The men were built broad, one shaven-headed, the other with a goatee carved to a blade's edge. Both wore black combat boots, vests emblazoned with HOA enforcement unit, and matching radios clipped to their shoulders. Plastic ID badges bounced against their chests like a second heartbeat, but their uniforms didn't match any known law enforcement template. They looked like mall cops who'd seen too many military thrillers. The shaven one led the charge, scanning the crowd like a wolf in a henhouse. "Shut it down," he snapped, like he was ordering a drug lab raid. His voice was too loud, too practiced, the kind of tone a man adopts when he knows authority is mostly theater. Aunt Carol clutched her clipboard like a shield. "Excuse me? What's this about?" The mirrored glasses turned toward her. Section 8B, unauthorized commerce on HOA-governed property. Garage sales are prohibited. There was no greeting, no badge number, no names, just immediate escalation. And that's when Tyler stood, sun-tanned, broad-shouldered, with a calm that didn't ask for attention but somehow held it anyway. He rose from his folding chair like an old dog who's seen one too many trespassers. His cap cast a shadow over his eyes. The chainsaw sat half-assembled beside him like a relic from another time. He spit a sunflower seed husk to the ground with surgical precision. Then he said nothing, just stared. And that silence spoke louder than the SUV's sirens ever could. There was something almost rehearsed about the way the lead officer flicked on his body cam, the little red light blinking like a warning signal no one had agreed to. He angled his shoulders toward the crowd, chest puffed out as if he were performing on a stage only he could see. "We're issuing citations," he announced, voice laced with a bureaucratic smugness that made the air feel heavier. "Each unlicensed transaction is a $250 fine. Ma'am, that includes the lemonade stand." Every voice within earshot fell away. My niece, just 8 years old, gap-toothed, elbows scraped from sidewalk games, froze mid-sip of her own product. Her tiny hands tightened around the Tupperware cash box like it contained something sacred. Inside were a dozen crumpled dollar bills, 2 rolls of pennies, and her entire sense of pride. The words, "lemonade stand," seemed to strike her harder than any threat of jail time could have. She took one quiet step back, eyes darting to Aunt Carol. Carol, whose every casserole contained both faith and heavy cream, squared her shoulders like a Sunday school teacher confronting a sinner who just said a curse word during hymnals. "We got written permission," she said, each syllable measured like a prayer, "from the HOA board, 2 months ago, Signed and stamped. The second man, younger but somehow meaner, smirked like he knew something we didn't. Board was restructured, he said. As of last week, we represent the Interim Compliance Task Force. He might as well have said, we are the law now. Carol blinked, lips parting as if to form another argument, but she never got the chance. Tyler had already stepped forward. There was no stomp or fanfare to it, just a shift in the center of gravity. He moved with the same quiet authority you might expect from a man who's wrestled cattle and cleaned his own rifles. Without raising his voice, without so much as twitching a brow, he positioned himself between Carol and the imposters like a dam holding back a flood. "Let's see your credentials," he said flatly. The response came not with proof, but with laughter, short, dry, and hollow. The first man shook his head. "You don't need to see IDs," he said, voice sharpening. "This neighborhood's under compliance lockdown." Lockdown. The word hit the ground like a dropped knife, silent but dangerous. Tyler didn't posture. He didn't puff his chest or reach for some invisible badge of importance. He just stood there like a man who'd stared down real danger and knew these two weren't it. His gaze flicked, unhurried, to the SUV idling at the curb. A paper tag flapped lazily in the breeze, stained and sun-faded, the kind used by backlot hustlers and vehicles that weren't meant to stick around. No official HOA emblem, no digital unit number, not even a neighborhood placard. What it did have, angled like a hunter's blind, was a suction-cupped GoPro trained directly at the folding tables full of mason jars, dog-eared novels, and glass figurines. It wasn't surveillance. It was content. Tyler's hand moved like wind over water, subtle but unmistakable. He brushed the side of his work jacket, just enough to part the fabric, just enough for the sun to catch on the stainless steel grip of the revolver tucked into his waistband. A .357, clean, oiled, not for show. The kind of thing you don't carry unless you're willing to use it. "You boys aren't HOA," he said, the words slow, deliberate, every syllable carrying the weight of a man who knows the law, like a farmer knows his fence line. "You're scammers." The tension in the air became tactile, like the world had taken a breath but wouldn't let it out. The man with the goatee let out a short, shaky laugh, but it was the kind of laugh that came too late, a half-second behind his brain catching up to the consequences. "Threatening an officer is a felony," he managed, voice cracking beneath the practiced authority. Tyler didn't flinch. His eyes didn't leave them, didn't even narrow. He didn't need to get loud because the ground beneath him already felt louder than their boots ever could. "You're not officers," he said again, slower this time, as if talking to someone who doesn't understand English until it's carved into stone. "And in Texas," he added, his voice molasses thick with regional truth, "fraud is a felony. So is impersonating authority." That landed. The air snapped tight, like someone had pulled piano wire between them. The fake officers didn't move, but the bravado drained from their shoulders. Their hands hovered near their belts, unsure of what they were reaching for: power, explanation, escape. But Tyler wasn't reaching. He was waiting. The bluff came desperate and loud, like a final coin tossed into a rigged machine. One of the men reached for his chest and unclipped a flimsy plastic badge, the kind you'd get from a novelty printer or a Halloween surplus store. He held it up like a crucifix warding off logic. The lamination was bubbled at the edges, and the seal it bore was neither state nor municipal, just a clip art gavel over a poorly kerned community compliance authority. "You're obstructing community governance," he barked, his voice rising in pitch, as if volume could will legitimacy into the badge. Carol, whose hands were normally steady from a lifetime of baking pound cakes and leading Sunday school, was trembling now. Her lips quivered as she turned toward me. "Call 911, she whispered, half prayer, half order. A woman raised to believe in the system but now uncertain where it stood. I reached for my phone, but Tyler was already ahead of us. He didn't dial. He filmed. With a flick of his thumb and a cold kind of certainty, Tyler opened Facebook Live and hit record. "Say hi to the internet," he said, voice low but clear, camera aimed steady. "These fellas are pretending to be HOA officers and threatening kids for selling lemonade." His words landed like thunder in a dry canyon. They weren't barked or dramatized. They didn't need to be. Because truth, when spoken by someone who knows it down to the marrow, doesn't require punctuation. At first, there was just the sound of insects and distant lawnmowers. Then came the screen doors. 3 of them, in rapid succession, creaked open like a domino fall of reckoning. First was Mr. Fulton, the retired postal worker. Then the Petersons, who never spoke much but always waved. Then old Mrs. Ramirez holding a broom like it was ceremonial. They all stepped out with the same squint. Not of confusion, but of recognition. They had seen this pattern before. Someone with just enough gear and ego trying to play at power. Phones came up, not angrily, not in panic, just calmly, methodically. Recording. The 2 fake enforcers turned slowly, their swagger now a silent stutter. Eyes scanned the windows, porches, the lenses pointed their way. They had come expecting silence, maybe a little fear. Instead, they found an audience. And this audience wasn't buying tickets, it was loading receipts. The sirens didn't wail. They didn't need to. Just the low growl of approaching engines and the rhythmic crunch of cruiser tires on sun-baked gravel was enough to crack the tension in half. 2 marked units turned onto the cul-de-sac with the slow precision of professionals who already knew this wasn't going to be a shootout, but might still turn into a headline. Dust curled up behind the bumpers like smoke off a gun barrel. Tyler saw them first. He didn't blink, didn't boast, just eased his jacket closed and slipped the revolver back into its holster like he'd done it 1,000 times before. Because he had. The gun disappeared beneath denim and discipline, and with it, any trace of escalation. He stepped back 2 paces, hands open at his sides, posture relaxed but alert. A man who understood chain of command, even if he no longer wore the badge. The real officers, tall, squared, radioed, and real, stepped out, their uniforms dusty but regulation, their eyes scanning everything at once. It didn't take long. The scene spoke for itself. An unlicensed SUV, fake IDs, multiple cell phones filming, and 2 men in tactical cosplay already sweating through their polyester vests. One of the fakes made the first mistake. "It's a private contract," he said, his voice suddenly shriveled without the camera bravado. "We're working in coordination with the HOA under legal. Name the board member." The taller officer cut in. The man blinked. "Excuse me? Who authorized you?" A pause, a glance at his partner, then a shrug. Second mistake. The shorter officer tried to pick up the slack. "We've got the paperwork in the vehicle." "Show it," the cop said flatly. They didn't move. That was when the real pivot came. Not with words, but a narrowing of eyes. The younger of the 2 responding officers tilted his head and frowned. "Hey, aren't you the guys from that scam in Tarrant County?" he asked, more to himself than anyone. And just like that, the floor dropped out. The 2 fake officers stiffened. The one with the goatee muttered something under his breath. The other tried to offer a denial, but the officer was already lifting his radio, already nodding to his partner. "Turn around," he said. "Hands behind your back." Click, click. The cuffs spoke louder than any speech could. No shouting, no struggle. Just 2 con men, stripped of costume, being walked off stage, while the whole neighborhood watched. And this time, the cameras didn't belong to them. By the time the sky turned honey gold and shadows stretched long across the lawn chairs and folding tables, the cul-de-sac felt less like a neighborhood and more like the closing scene of a western, the kind where the dust settles, the villain's been dealt with, and the townsfolk come out of hiding, not in fear, but in reverence. But this wasn't a movie set. It was real. And the aftermath buzzed not with trauma, but with something rarer. Community triumph. Word had spread faster than gossip in a barber shop. Tyler's live stream, raw and unedited, had traveled through group chats, neighborhood forums, and Facebook pages like a brush fire through dry prairie. It didn't take long before strangers were pulling up in their trucks, not to shop, but to show up, to bear witness, to say thanks, or maybe just to be part of something that felt honest in a world that often doesn't. The garage sale swelled. What had begun as a modest front lawn exchange of knickknacks became something bigger, a celebration, a reclamation of space. The hiss of soda cans cracked open. A neighbor rolled out his Bluetooth speaker and played Merle Haggard like it was the national anthem. Lawn chairs multiplied, and so did the stories. My niece, emboldened by the attention, posted a handwritten sign over her Barbie crate. As seen on viral video, limited supply. Every last doll, from astronaut to ballerina, was gone by sundown. The cash box was so full she had to rubber band it shut. Aunt Carol beamed behind her lemonade table, wiping condensation off pitchers and handing out second cups for free. She wore her church pin like it was a badge of honor, and when someone asked why she didn't raise the price after going viral, she said, "Because the Lord didn't charge extra for grace." She handed $300 to the roof fund the next morning. As for Tyler, he didn't boast, didn't make speeches, just sat back in his weathered camping chair, polishing the grip of his revolver with a bit of cloth and the easy rhythm of someone who knew he'd done right. When a teenager with a skateboard asked him if it was all real, Tyler tipped his hat and said, "Son, fake law don't last long in a real town." The following week, the HOA board sent out a letter. No threats, no warnings, just gratitude. Real security cameras were installed, but they weren't pointed at driveways or lawn decorations anymore. They faced the street, outward, and for once, it felt like they weren't watching us. They were watching out for us.